American Military University proudly presents Mission San Diego Military, produced by the San Diego Military Advisory Council and Cloudcast Media. San Diego is America's finest military city. From the Marines and Navy to the Coast Guard and Naval Special Warfare, San Diego is a proud military town. Mission San Diego Military will help you better understand how the San Diego military leads, innovates, and cares for community and country. Mission San Diego Military, co-hosted by the CEO of the San Diego Military Advisory Council, retired Rear Admiral David Boone, and Drew Schlossberg with Cloudcast Media, begins right now.
I'm Drew Schlossberg of Cloudcast Media. You'll be listening to another edition of Mission San Diego Military, brought to you by American Military University since 1993, doing great things for military families and veterans. Thrilled to have as my co-host, my colleague, David Boone. He's the president and CEO.
Great to be here.
Oh, man, just absolutely. Of the San Diego Military Advisory Council, retired Rear Admiral, and the Mission San Diego Military podcast series is also brought to you by Cloudcast Media. So pleased to have in the studio with us today Maggie Meza. She is Maggie Meza. She is the Executive Director of Blue Star Family San Diego chapter, and my longtime friend and colleague. He is the CEO of North San Diego Business Chamber, Chris Thorne. So Maggie and Chris, how you guys doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. David, if I may, let me just start with Maggie and just the mission of the organization.
Yeah. So our mission at Blue Star Families is really to connect and support our military families where they are living, connect them to the community to try to give them that sense of belonging.
Which is so key. And in this world in the 21st century, belonging is so critical, whether it's the military, whether it's the schools, the youth, and everything in between. Chris, my friend, the mission of your wonderful chamber.
Yeah, like any chamber of commerce, our primary mission is to be an advocate for our business community and create connections and opportunities for the community. As a regional chamber for San Diego County, we also take on a lot of other opportunities for the business community to give back. And so we do that through different ways, whether that's San Diego Women's Week that we put on, whether that's the annual First Responder Awards for the county that we put on, whether it's getting into our military community for things like San Diego Military Summit and Operation Connect. And so we're just really glad to be able to help the business community connect to what is such a big part of our San Diego community.
Right, and the theme of our the podcast, Barriers to Success for Transitioning Military and Their Veterans. I'll let you start us off, David.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Back in the beginning of this year, we, SDMAC, determined that among our priorities, our number one priority was going to be retaining veterans and transitioning military in California. They're leaving our state at a very high rate, and we'll get into the discussion about why that is and what can we do about it. But that's been a focal point for SDMAC this year. And more recently, in the first week in November, CalVet had an executive summit here in San Diego. They do it every year, where they cover a lot of different topics and policy areas that they're affecting across the state. And one of which was this topic of barriers for veterans and transitioning military. And our two guests, among our other guests on the subsequent episodes, were panel members on that day to talk about these issues. So that's why we're really pleased to have them both back for this session.
Yeah, and we know that, the military families face challenges today. Not that they haven't had challenges in the past, of course, but could be a little bit more unique today. Talk about that, Maggie.
Yeah, our military families, they move every 2 to 3 years. And isolation is, probably the thing that stops them from even being able to get within the community. For Blue Star Families, we have an annual lifestyle survey that we do every single year. We ask our military members and their families, what is it that they need? And we take those responses and we turn that in for us as data-driven programs that support them where they need. So, we offer military spouse employment support, childcare resources, financial literacy, and so on to support them.
You mentioned Blue Star Families. For our audience, if you could explain what Blue Star and Gold Star families are, that might be helpful.
Yeah, so our Blue Star families are our active duty military families, currently serving all across the country. For our Gold Star families, that's a different aspect of, something that has happened to them, their service member having passed away while on active duty. And we support our Gold Star families as well, but really we're focusing in on every single active duty military member and family and supporting them through their journey and then afterwards.
And it's important to note for the Blue Star families, in our region, many of them are deployed. So it really is just the family with their service member, whatever service, could be deployed halfway around the world.
You know, Dave, we've talked about this before on our Mission San Diego military episodes, and probably, as long as we've been doing this type of a show. And you can't lose the fact that when whoever's deployed, the last thing they need to be worrying about is the family back home, whether it's in San Diego or Virginia, whatever the case may be. They got enough on their mind as they're wherever they are stationed.
It's a great point. And when I talk to military leaders, I talk about family issues as military readiness, right? For exactly that point, if the military member, wherever they're at, is focused on worrying about their family instead of
the mission,
it detracts from readiness. And so our active duty military commanders, they get that, and they're very supportive of these issues.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And Chris, having one of the most successful chambers, North San Diego Business Chamber, 850 members or something to that effect. It's a little bit of a misnomer because it's not just in North San Diego; it's all throughout the region itself. And of course, thank you for your service as well in the Navy. Of course,
call him Doc.
I call him Doc. I call him a lot of things, but
most of them shouldn't be on the radio.
Well, good friend is one of them, and so forth, and respected colleague. But you get it, obviously, certainly because of your background in the military. But knowing these businesses have to know what is going on in the world of Blue, Star families. Talk about that.
Yeah, so, it's really interesting. Here we are living in one of the highest density military population areas in the United States of America, 200,000 active duty service members spread across Navy and Marine Corps predominantly, but all services. So we've got Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard heavily represented. We've even got Space Force in the area. It's a huge portion of the San Diego population is our military community family here. So our businesses, our business community, it's an ingrained element. If you're in San Diego, you are supportive to the military. But what we generally find ourselves seeing is that there's still a disconnect between the two communities. Even though the military community is so largely integrated into San Diego writ large, we still see a separation between our business community and our military community. And that creates divides for opportunities, not just for when we talk about jobs and transition, but how do we support our active duty families, those Blue Star families. And by the way, I love Blue Star families because, like them, I'm very deliberate about not just focusing on military spouses. There's an entire family that is out there in need of support, whether that's young, old, middle-aged. Sometimes it could be ex-spouses who still are part of that military community. And so that's why one of the reasons I love Blue Star families is because that all-inclusive. And so, here in San Diego, I think we've got a business community that wants to, that actually needs to, and I know we'll talk about this more, needs to connect. But we still see those barriers, those separation, cultural, physical, space. And so a lot of what we have to do is attack how do we bridge those divides? How do we create the space for them to come together in ways that we haven't done in the past?
Yeah, it's a good point that even though we're known as a military community, people tend to live in bubbles. And unless they have a direct family member or a very close friend that's in the military, they live in a bubble outside of the military. And what they know about the military is all hearsay and perception, right? And so a lot of us in the nonprofit space attempt to break down those barriers to bring the community into our military ecosystem so there's a better exchange of ideas and pathways for both sides to have success.
Yeah, and I was, you certainly, Maggie, you don't ignore veterans. Your focus is on active duty, of course. And of course, Chris, with your group, it's certainly met veterans and active duty. And to the point you bring up, spot on that, Chris, and I know Maggie agrees with this. It's in the entire family, and it's the connections and the spouses and the pets, even, I guess, for that aspect, if you want to throw that in, and it's so critical. And I think you brought up something that's just so spot on. It's the belonging, and whether you are a new Blue Star family because someone just started it, or you've been a veteran Blue Star family, I guess if that's the right word for it. Talk about how critical the communication is and letting people know here are the services offered.
I mean, so my husband did 30 years in the Marine Corps, and we moved every 2 to 3 years. And, yes, he went through a tough time, but he got to put on that uniform, have the same name tape on, and meet people that had the uniform. Me and my children, we gave up every community that tried to embrace us or that we embraced. And so one of the things that I found that when I was able to work for Blue Star Families was that I was the mission. I'm the family, and I was what we are seeking to do. So I'm so passionate about being able to get that word out there and say, these are your resources. How can we partner together? We're a lot of us in the community that are in the nonprofit space, but we're all complements to one another. What you do and what I do and what you do are so different, but we really are serving the same community. So that's where joining forces is really key. To have the community look at us and say, wow, look at what they're doing. We should probably get involved too.
If I've learned anything, and Chris is, chuckling, goes, well, you learned something, Drew, that's even more amazing, and David, you and I talk about it quite a bit, and that is those folks that are, whether they're veterans or they're in uniform, serve multiple times. They certainly are protecting us on our soil and abroad. But they're involved in the community. Mm-hmm. They are the Little League coaches. They're involved in, water authority things or whatever the case may be. And Maggie, just talk about how important that is, that the connectivity of what the Blue Star families are with each community.
Military members want a mission, right? They want to serve a mission that's bigger than themselves. And it doesn't end when you take off your uniform. Whether they work in private sector for a company or nonprofit or go out on their own, they want a mission. And it's amazing what they will do to support others because that is how they thrive. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of us try to support that kind of approach to our military workforce, whether they're on active duty or transitioning.
Yeah. I'm Drew Schlossberg with Cloudcast Media and co-host of Mission San Diego Military, brought to you by American Military University since 1993. We're really elevating and educating our military and their families. So pleased to have in the studio with us today Maggie Meza, Executive Director of Blue Star Families San Diego chapter, and Chris Thorne. He's the CEO of North San Diego Business Chamber, joined by my colleague, friend, co-host, David Boone, the president and CEO of the San Diego Military Advisory Council. Chris, talk a little bit about of your organization, and when you meet with a new member of the North San Diego Business Chamber, mm-hmm. how much do you bring in talking about what the military means to our community?
When we talk with our new members, we actually integrate the fact that as a community, that's how we really thrive. And that's one of the things we actually look for across many different areas from the chamber. But we emphasize to everyone how significant our military community is to the region from a, those who live here, whether it's veteran active duty, the families, or those who are affiliated, whether it's the workforce population, the potential workforce population, a huge portion there. Obviously, a huge portion of the gross regional, when we talk about San Diego, the direct expenditure on military, but also we have a great defense industrial base that is headquartered out of San Diego. But it's not just those large defense industrial companies that we all know of. It's all of those subcontractors, those small mom and pops who have the opportunity to do small business that really feeds too. And we know that 91% of the San Diego economy is small business. And so really those large defense contractors being such a large portion of our gross regional product creates the opportunity for those small businesses, whether it's in service industry, whether it's a direct supplier of parts, products, or things that they need, whether it's through other mechanisms. It's an enabler across. And so from a business perspective, understanding what our military is in the region is imperative to understanding how our business community operates, thrives, and will function moving forward. It's also something when we talk with community leaders, business leaders, and elected leaders to make sure that we're emphasizing those same points, because from a policy perspective, it's important to keep those in mind. It's why we have a Military Affairs Advisory Council to really not just talk about, hey, let's go out and do a feeding families, which is great. We love doing those things. But how do we make sure we're educating and informing our business and our elected community about the importance and what's happening in there? So we make it a part of every conversation, really.
Well, you mentioned something that's near and dear to David's heart, anybody who's involved with SDMAC, and that's the annual military economic impact study just released, I think it was last month, if I'm not mistaken, David. And, I'm sure I'm going to get the numbers, messed up here. What, $38 billion in direct spending, or is it
$39 billion in direct, and then $61 billion
indirect.
When you add the multiplier effect, it's the gross regional product.
Right. So just think about that in 2008 when we had the meltdown in real estate and in the whole community, that without the military, we'd be in trouble. Let me just get back to you, Maggie. Something that you're real proud of is that what you folks do is focus on data-driven programming, and it's based on that survey you do. Talk about that.
That's right. Yeah, so our survey started in 2009, same year that we started, by 6 military spouses that saw a need. And we work with Syracuse University, IVMF, and every year we get over 10,000 respondents across the nation. And our military families and even our veterans and active duty are telling us, this is the need. And this is what we're seeing the problem is. And we've been able to take that to utilize for our own organization with our data-driven programming to meet them in the community where it's needed most. And so some of those were, time away from family. We talk about how many families are here while their service member is deployed. And so what we do for our families is just to really get them out, get them to free events. And then naturally they start networking and they start building their own community within to help them while they're here.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And Chris, you're all about data, as you need to be with the chamber and that aspect. How do you use that data with your businesses, large and small? And I'm so glad you brought up the bread and butter of almost any major metro is the small businesses, of course, as you mentioned. But how do you use that data that can help elevate what's going on in the military, whether it's Blue Star families or the veterans?
Some of it that I think is really important when we talk from a data perspective in our employers. Let's talk employment numbers. Unfortunately, U.S. right now, we've got reasonably good unemployment data, which is great to see, and we love seeing that. But California has the highest unemployment in the nation right now, and unfortunately, when you take the pocket of San Diego County and the associated areas around it, it's also the highest of California. We have a really weird dichotomy happening here in San Diego, where we have thousands, tens of thousands of job openings from great employers in the region seeking skilled people, skilled labor, skilled workers, hard, dedicated workers for those jobs. but they're vacant roles out there that they can't fill. And then you take that and you contrast that against the fact that every year we have 20,000 active duty service members leave active duty service from one of the military services here in San Diego. They're here, their family's already here, they're part of the community already, and yet out of those 20,000 who separate from active duty, so many of them, and I know this is part of the conversation, so many of them choose to leave. Now, look, many of them want to go back home to where their family and support system's at, and that's great. That's wonderful. Many of them have opportunities or they're going to education. Those are wonderful. We want to encourage and support that one. But many of them leave simply because they don't know how to connect to those opportunities to be able to set up a sustainable life moving forward after the military in an incredibly high cost of living area that is San Diego. So from a data perspective, when I see a massive need, a vacuum pocket of need on the business side, we need the talent, but it's not being filled. And I see this massive bubble of amazing talent that is coming out of the military in the region every year, but they're leaving. That's a data-driven disconnect right there, and that's something we absolutely have to address.
How do we address it?
Well, there's a million ways. First one is to something Maggie said, there's a lot of nonprofits in the area, and the first thing is being collaborative in what we do. We all have our missions, we all have our focus, but when we collaborate, we're better together so that we can help address things. From our perspective, I think one of the things we're really trying to look at is adjusting the mindset of transition in that last 6 months or 12 months of service. Tends to be what's out there. Transition is not something you do at the end of your service when you get your DD-214. It's something you start the moment you sign the contract on the dotted line. It's career-long readiness through your military career to prepare so that when you get to that end of military service, whether it's 4 years or 40 years, we're all going to get a DD-214 someday. And so when you hit that point, instead of it being this cliff that you fall off of and then you have to start climbing back up again, you can make a continuity of progress, just like everyone else wants to do in their full adult careers. Nobody plans. I don't think, Drew, did you go into your career saying I'm going to get to age 45 and then start over like I'm 18 again?
No, I did have a little bit of a pathway, but didn't know it was going to end up with podcasting because there was nothing so it didn't even make anywhere. There was no such thing as podcast.
But we all do reinvent ourselves through the process of our careers. But you hope that there's some continuity and progressiveness to that. And so I think what we're trying to look at is how do we make the connections earlier? How do we make the networks more natural? How do we bridge that divide? Take down, we need the fence lines around the installation, but how do we metaphorically take them down so when that young 24, 25-year-old Marine or sailor comes off of the base, it's not just to do a beach cleanup and then go back on the base. How do we get them into the community to be members of the community? And so we're trying to work on some of that.
No, that is spot on. I'm Drew Schlossberg of Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Mission San Diego Military, brought to you by American Military University since 1993, doing great things for our military and their families, joined by Chris Thorne. He's the CEO of North San Diego Business Chamber, and Maggie Meza, Executive Director of Blue Star Families San Diego Chapter, joined by my co-host David Boone for SDMAC. We're going to be right back after this short message.
My first PCS, when I came back to stateside, we were so stressed out. Everything was just thrown at us, and I wish I could just go back and tell past me, like, hey, it's going to be fine. Go with the flow.
I'm Drew Schlossberg of Cloudcast Media, listening to another edition of Mission San Diego Military, brought to you by American Military University. We are thrilled to chat about barriers to success for transitioning military and their veterans, joined by Chris Thorne, CEO of the North San Diego Business Chamber, and Maggie Meza. She is the Executive Director of Blue Star Families San Diego Chapter, and my co-host, David Boone, CEO of SDMAC. David?
We just talked about what can we do about it? What can we do about retaining and attracting veterans to our state? We, SCMAC, are sponsoring a bill, SB 519, is to create a task force at the state level with the legislature to look at all the ways to retain veterans in California, to include housing, child care, license reciprocity for military spouses, workforce transition that Chris was just talking about. But I do want to point out, because a lot of people don't know, that this year in 2025, for the 24 tax year, for the first time ever, we successfully pushed into the legislature, and it was passed, a $20,000 tax exemption on military retirement pay. Now, it has caps on gross income that will limit it for a lot of people. But this year, going into 26, we're already working to get a full tax exemption on military retirement pay. 38 other states in the union fully exempt military retirement pay. So I feel very confident we're going to get there. It's a hard slog sometimes, but we're going to get there. But the point is, there are lots of things that contribute. The high cost of living in San Diego is kind of at the source of a lot of it, and we're trying to provide some relief on the taxation front. So we're going to get there.
Yeah, well, first of all, kudos to you that you've been, SDMAC's been working on this for quite a while. And, certainly it's a no-brainer when the research has shown that you do this and you're retired veterans who may, after their 20-year career, are 39 years old. My goodness, another 25 more years of work to do. And, of course, obviously the brain drain when they leave and do that. And I agree with you 100%, Chris. People leave for the right reasons. They're going to go to college, going to see my family, and that's fine. We don't want them to leave for the wrong reasons in this area. Maggie, talk about, here you are. You were one of, what you said, 6 families that started Blue Star families?
There were 6.
There were 6
spouses,
of us. Oh, my goodness. And how many now are involved? How many families?
Wow. So for working for Blue Star families, I would say we're over 100.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, congratulations on that.
Yes.
And I think that's terrific. Now, what would you say are some of the still critical challenges? We talked about, certainly San Diego isn't the most inexpensive place to live, but some of the challenges that some of the Blue Star families face as well.
So I would say that, we talked earlier about, moving so much. I want to say that, for the data that we do, and find 70% of our military families live off of the base. And so they are in the community. They're your neighbor. And, I think that maybe what our families are missing out on is, not knowing who their neighbor is as well. So, we're missing that little bit of community. I think that, COVID didn't help too much when we all kind of stopped talking to each other. But I know our families would really probably have more value in their neighbors reaching out to them and getting to know them. And, for myself, we moved so much that I couldn't even apply for a job because I was even asked, well, how long are you going to be here for? And, and that's tough. So, I lost a little bit of my identity along the way and, poured everything into my family and supporting my husband and his career. And so once we get to the end of his career and we talk about transitioning, it really was kind of like what I wanted to do, it was my time. And he's a Marine and I tell him his ship has been docked. So, like, too bad, just it's time. But no one ever really talks about that. No one talks about that for transition. And no one really, unless you have mentors around you or you have your community that those have transitioned already. So I think our families are experiencing really the lack of knowledge and the resources that they need. And that's why we all really work hard to get them those resources.
There's a dynamic here in San Diego that is associated with what Maggie is saying. Because of the high cost of living, sailors and Marines are having to live further and further away from their bases. And so their transit to and from work becomes longer and longer. They have to invest more of their income in transportation. But what that means is they're living more remote too. And so without organizations like Blue Star Families, a unless they're able to connect in some way, it makes it that much harder to be a part of our community.
Right.
And so that dynamic is continuing to happen unless we all do something about it.
Right.
Yeah, and Chris, let me ask you this: with your chamber, you guys are all among 4 billion other things you're involved in is entrepreneurship, right? Do you offer those types of seminars or courses for military-owned businesses?
So, we do a lot of work with the small business. Obviously, it's a huge portion. 65% of our chamber members are small business. And when I say small business, vast majority of them are those solopreneurs, those mom and pops,
Absolutely.
those 10 employees or less, right? There's nothing I love more than going to a ribbon cutting for a new business that's opening their front doors on commerce that's going to happen, that's going to create employment, that's going to create opportunities. So we love introducing our military and veteran community to that one as well. We bring, anytime we are bringing the conversation around business ownership, entrepreneurship, we make it the holistic. So we bring military members, military community into the larger conversation, because to that point of community, oftentimes where we make a mistake is we make segregated pockets of engagement, and we put the military community into that pocket of engagement over here, instead of saying, you're going to be an entrepreneur and I love you because you're military, and there's going to be some great opportunities through the SBA and through some others for you. But instead of me creating this pocket of you military people over here entrepreneuring, how about we bring you all together so this other 90% of the bubble of entrepreneurs are there to be your collaborators, your supporters, your B2B businesses that you're going to do business and engage with, and begin that integration now. And so we don't, aside from a couple of things that we do very intentionally to try and connect to our military community, we try to make a point of integrating them into the larger community of business rather than creating segregated pockets.
Well, you're an entrepreneur no matter what you are.
Absolutely.
Military, athlete, doesn't make a difference. Teacher in that vein with it. What do you see since you and your military Blue Star families started this, Maggie, the biggest change you've seen in some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that Blue Star families have?
Yeah. So, the biggest changes have been that for us, for an organization, we've been able to grow over to 13 chapters across the nation, which means that if someone from San Diego is moving to Jacksonville, Florida, they already have their community there. So that's what's neat about the way we're building community within. And the challenges are still having the conversation of, do you see our military families? Do you know what they go through? And so it's more of an educating our civilian counterparts of what a military family experiences, and having conversations like this is key into the education part for them.
Yeah, I don't know. I would shake my head and think, unless you've been living in the different solar system, but how could you not know this? Well, because they're not aware of it, because they have not worked with the military family in this area. As David knows, my father fought in World War II, but he wasn't he did it as a Navy doctor and all that business, so we didn't have to move anywhere and all that business. But certainly the folks I know that went to school with in the west side of L.A., how come Joe Blow wasn't there anymore? Well, his dad is now working in What? That happens? You don't know this stuff. You're right. You got to sit there and articulate this as much as possible. David, weigh in on that. Just the communication aspect of letting folks know who are not in the military, this is what a military family does.
I think people that aren't associated with the military have a distant knowledge of, military members transfer every so often, and okay, they have challenges, but the government takes care of them. So what's the big deal? I think that's, unless there's some sort of firsthand experience, that's the prevailing thought, right? And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to help not only break down barriers, but help understand what our military members and families go through every time they transfer. I transferred 15 times in 30 years with 5 kids, dragging them. We did 3-4 overseas tours. And so every move is a challenge, and it's a focus to get your family up and running and moving and doing all the right things. So it's not that the community doesn't care. It's just not top of mind.
Right.
And when you're not, if you don't have firsthand knowledge, it doesn't come automatically to you, all these obstacles that families face.
Yeah, but at least, the opportunity that, at least Chris has with his 850 members is to let these folks know. And a new business starts, or someone came in town from somewhere else and it wasn't necessarily a military town. Oh, I didn't realize we're the #1 military port in the country, of course, with all the folks we have here. I think that's a great opportunity. So I'll start with you on this, Maggie, and then pivot over to Chris, and certainly David, you weigh in. What can our listeners do to continue to support the great work you're doing at Blue Star Families?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing they can do is listen to this podcast.
I agree.
No, but really educate, dive in. Knowledge is power, and get to know your neighbors. And when you do see someone in uniform, because that's going to be the first identifier, right? Don't just say thank you for your service. Also say, how can I be of assistance to you? I think those are the first steps, and then being able to reach out to us all individually as nonprofits and business chamber and say, how can I help? We love volunteers. Nonprofits, we love and live off of our volunteers. So I would say start with that.
And what's the website? How do people get a hold of you?
BlueStarFam.org.
Right, exactly. You're not going to turn down donations.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we say quite a bit on whatever show it is, there's nothing is too little of a donation. We just want you to get engaged.
Yes.
And that's it. Chris, what can we do to just elevate the amazing work your chamber does?
Oh, no, I appreciate it. It is that point, right? We need to just think about it. How do we expand and grow the community so that we create those opportunities for connective tissue? How do it's a great point Maggie makes. When you see that military member in your neighborhood, reach out, say hi. But I would also encourage, learn about them, let them learn about you, not just as who you are as a uniform, but who you are without the uniform, to create that direct connection that isn't all just centered around what you do in the military, right? And I personally don't blame anyone who isn't directly connected with the military for not understanding. I mean, I happen to be around, medicine. Your dad was a doctor, right?
That's right.
People who are in families that do medicine go through some very significant things that nobody, if you're not associated with, completely would understand, right? Same thing, families of first responders.
That's right.
Same thing when we talk about families of diplomats. It's actually one of the reasons I mentioned I love when I get to go and visit new companies to learn about all of these little nuances of what life around different industries is all about. And from that perspective, sometimes we just have to remember that to the larger community, the military is just another one of those industries that they need to learn what the nuances around it are. So let's all just learn a little bit more about each other. And I think if we take that part and we focus on creating those communities that, again, not centered around, oh, well, you're a military person. Oh, it's really just, we are that community, and bring them together. And that's the one I really try to focus on when we, as a chamber, try to help our members, our businesses. We're never trying to sell their product. As a matter of fact, we tell people, if you come to one of our events and the first thing you do is whip out a business card, you're probably in the wrong chamber. What we want is for people to meet each other on a first name basis and to create connections as human beings, and let that flourish into what connections turn into opportunities down the road. And I think bilaterally, military coming out to make those connections, and our business community and community writ large making those connections to our military. That's how we learn and grow.
Well, relationships have always been the key to almost anything, whether it's the military or whether it's business or journalism or communication, without a question. David, any final thoughts?
Well, we had great guests today, and I think they said it very well. I'll just end with be in our community with an open heart, right? And it doesn't matter if you're in the business community, the military community, the elected officials on the government, wherever you're at, it doesn't matter. If you're there in our community with an open heart, you are curious about others and what their background, what their experience, then we evolve as a better community.
There's no question about it. Well, to Chris Thorne, CEO of North San Diego Business Chamber, and Maggie Mesa, the Executive Director of Blue Star Family San Diego Chapter, thank you. Great content provided to our Mission San Diego military audience. Thank you, American Military University, for a sponsor of this program. This is great content. Listen to our audience if you want to get involved in helping out those active duty and working with the chambers, with the military, or anyone in general. Please give them a shout out. And to our audience, we hope you enjoyed the interview.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission San Diego Military, presented by American Military University, an educational leader for active duty military, veterans, and their families. Mission San Diego Military is produced by the San Diego Military Advisory Council in partnership with Cloudcast Media, the national leader in local podcasting. We're sure you learned quite a bit about why San Diego is America's finest military city. Please like, subscribe, and share the show.
Cloudcast Media.